Assalamu alaikum. We are back now in the season where people are now starting to prepare for Hajj next year. So we thought it would be an appropriate time to look at how last year's Hajj went. And we do have some feedback and suggestions for Hajj and Nusuk team. Alhamdulillah, we definitely appreciate the efforts of the Minister of Hajj and Umrah and the rest of the team who put together the whole solution in place and for coordinating and arranging Hajj in 2023. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept everyone's sacrifices and accept everybody who did Hajj. The goal here is not to point out faults. Rather, the intention is to provide feedback to Ministry of Hajj and Umrah and also to the Nusuk team. So hopefully things can be even better in 2024. So with that, let's get started. Let's talk about Nusuk first. Right, it is a great initiative being a marketplace for Hujjaj to view, compare, and decide which packages works for them. In 2023, this has been the first year for the platform. There was few logistical and technical issues in the process, which did cause frustration and challenges for people planning for Hajj. So let's start with Nusuk registration. The requirements for loading of images for passport and residential proof initially were not clear. Which page of the passports are needed, what is accepted as a residential proof, etc., which caused some frustration. So our recommendation would be to provide some examples of what works, what is acceptable, and what would not lead to a rejection. So this would help the Hujjaj prepare better. Next, let's talk about the packages. Nusuk, the release of packages were in several batches with no specific advance notice. Very frustrating experience, and for people having to basically stay up in the night, and there was a lot of miscommunication, and people say, yeah, packages are available, packages are not available. It would be a hard place for everybody who wanted to go figure out and make sure that they will actually get it. It was a hard experience for everybody. So our recommendation would be that if Nusuk can release all the packages at the same time, define a prior date saying this is the date when the packages will be released for the year and for this country, and even more if they could actually mention the quota for the country and how many quota is already used up. Those kind of updates would ease up a lot of the anxiety that Hujjaj faced while trying to book packages. Also, they could consider allowing a little bit more of land-only packages. They were helpful for people who had custom travel plans. It was really hard to define your own travel arrangements. Sometimes people would like to go back home, leave their families. They had like their own custom travel arrangements needed. And with the packages that had flights and hotels booked, it was a harder experience as we couldn't really change those packages easily. So the more land-only packages allowing the Hujjaj to book the rest of the arrangements on their own. Let's talk about payment. Payment using, for example, with credit cards was a hard ask because the ask it would only allow a single credit card, and if you have multiple people in your family, you're paying for 3 or 4 people, it could be a large amount, and there is a good chance the credit cards get denied. It could be flagged for fraud. So what would end up happening is people would lose out of the package in the meantime. There was also some confusion around the cash payment options, demand draft options, what information needs to be added to each one of them. In some cases, the demand draft option would show the payment info before the package was booked, and this led to people sending out the money ahead of time when they didn't really have a package booked. So our recommendation definitely is going to be for credit cards, if they could allow holding packages until the credit payment goes through. This can take some time. So if they could give a little bit of a time where the package is held for the person trying to make that payment, sometimes it takes multiple tries. And also allowing multiple credit cards. If it is a larger amount, it is helpful if it could be split between multiple credit cards. That would allow them to pay it easily without getting into problems with your credit card. Also, it would be great if you can allow changing of payment type. Sometimes people select credit card, but then wanted to do it a different way. The only other way would be to basically cancel your whole reservation package and then try to find again, which was again a really hard ask. So if they were allowed the changing the payment type for a pre-booked reservation, it would really help. Second is also providing the exact amount with fees included, like people who did cash payments or demand draft, they had like to account for currency conversion fees, they had to account for fees the banks would take. If they could include the fees that would be needed, at least the fees that the receiving bank that is taking, so that they knew the exact amount, including the fees. Sometimes people sent an amount over, but it did turn out to not be enough. Third is cash collection centers. This was not a standard process. People had different experiences. At some places, the people knew what to do. Every cash collection center kind of had their own way of doing things. There was not a standard way to contact people. It would just be a standard published process. People were concerned whether it would need to be literally cash or it would need to be a demand draft or what all the options. Does it need to be paid in US dollars? Does it need to be paid in Saudi riyals? There was a lot of ambiguity around this process, and it just became hard for people wanting to do this. Let's talk about the user interface. The packages were sold out, were being showed as available. This was causing people to try indefinitely and always get stuck. There were a lot of packages that were like the problem packages, and it was just added to the frustrations. The recommendation would be to, if they could review the design, ensure only packages that are actually available and that can be booked. A lot of times people are getting error messages when trying to book saying your quota is completed, but the package was there. So if the quota is finished and then they were not selling it anymore and there were no more packages to be sold, then the packages ideally would not be visible. This would make things a lot easier for everybody. So that would really help if they could review the design, especially with UI. Additionally, if they could also add a mechanism to filter by your departure city. A lot of packages included that information, but it was really hard to filter this out to find out if I am interested in only finding packages that start from New York. It wasn't super easy to do that. You had to basically click on each package, figure out which one is available, where does it start by clicking on the flight details. If there was a filter on the left that allowed them to search for the flight, that would be really helpful. Next, let's talk about customer support. The customer support was very limited from both Nusuk and service providers. They were mostly responding, if you were to reach out to Nusuk support, it would mostly respond with scripted responses that were not very helpful. Some of the service providers, when contacted through the contact information provided on the packages, were not responding for a long time, and by the time the packages would get sold out. So if the recommendation would be to assign responsibility on both Nusuk and service provider to check what the exact issue is and not to use scripted responses and standard answers for every question without understanding what is being asked. Also, if there could be some kind of SLA around it to say, yes, you can expect a response or in a specific amount of time, that would be really helpful. Next, let's talk about the service providers. Some service providers fulfill all the obligations or most of the obligations, and the Hujjaj in general express satisfaction with the service. However, there were others that were not as responsible, and that created multiple challenges for the Hujjaj. So let's talk about some of them. First is flights. The service providers changed the date of the departure city almost a few days before the actual departure date, causing passengers to change their plan. A lot of times, people had packages starting from New York, for example, and then then they would have booked domestic flights in accordance with the flight information shared to be there, so that they can then travel from the booked flights provided by the packages. But then if those flights were changed, the days changed, or the departure airport changed, this caused a lot of issues for people trying to, this was called financial challenges, mental challenges, just being in that state of mind where they were not really sure what's happening. In some cases, what we heard was family members were forced to travel on different days, and some cases different airports. So our recommendation would be to require the Ministry of Hajj and Umrah should require service providers to submit a proof of reservation before it gets listed in Nusuk. They should have confirmed that those flights and not advertised flights that they have not really booked for. So the last hassle caused a lot of headache for people, and that could have been easily avoided. Next, let's talk about hotels. Some Hujjaj reported that the occupancy was not honored, the photo information was not the same. Some people paid for double, but then there were more than two in that room. Sometimes the hotel that was provided in the package was not actually available and were provided different hotels, which was not nearly the same standards that was originally booked. So the recommendation again here would be for the service provider to be required to show a proof of the reservation. They should have reservations already done, right? And not advertise the hotel that they don't have prior commitments from. Next one with guides. Some Hujjaj shared that some guides were not as responsive. They were left unattended and stranded. For a lot of people, this is the first time that they're going to the country and they're new to Hajj, they're new to the country. So it is really on the responsibility of the guides to be there to guide and answer questions. So our recommendation would be that these minimum responsibilities of guides be called out and the guides be held accountable to those responsibilities. So that was all for today. Please like, share, and subscribe. If you have additional feedback, feel free to share those in the comments. The goal is not to try to point fingers or identify faults, but yeah, the goal is that how we can then use this feedback for constructive improvement. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum.